Everyone knows Lexus vehicles are ultra reliable and they're good for running 3, 4, 500,000 miles if you take care of them. But the real question is, if they're so reliable, is it worthwhile buying a used Lexus? Well, it may seem obvious, but believe it or not, it's not that obvious. There's many reasons why you should buy a used one and some reasons why you shouldn't. Clearly, if you've been following lately, you'll notice on consumers' reports of most reliable vehicles, Toyota and Lexus are number 1 and 2 spots. And on top of that, everyone knows that Lexus is the big brother to Toyota, and clearly they take special pride in the quality construction, manufacturing, and for quality control, so people don't have to bring their cars back time and time and time again for reliability issues. You know, I have this great mechanic friend of mine that works on everything from Ferraris to Hondas to Toyotas to Fords, and he literally says that every car will have its problem areas. Doesn't matter what it is, it's mechanical, it will fail. The fact of the matter is, Toyota and Lexus are in fact one of the most reliable. And before we touch on some of those key failure areas to watch out for in a used Lexus, I just want to give you some examples of some of the good vehicles primarily that you would potentially look at 5 years of age, and some of those that you definitely don't want to touch. The first car that you definitely want to consider buying if you're worrying about reliability and getting best bang for your buck is what we're looking at here, and we're talking about a Lexus ES350. Yeah, they all have that great headlights and they all have the big mouth grille, and some people love and some people don't love so much, but they do have some nice detail like that, and you're always going to find nice wheels on most of these Lexus vehicles. You also have the LC500 style mirrors, sunroofs, and a really, really gorgeous interior, well equipped. And this beautiful little overhang with this lip and some glorious looking rear tail light assembly. But the ES350 carries that glorious naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V6. It's bulletproof. This vehicle is also based on Toyota Avalon, which is also one of the top picks for reliability. So you know reliability is definitely going to be your top pop. And so if you're looking for something that's used that isn't totally worn out and then likely will last the test of time, go for something with the naturally aspirated, like this beautiful Toyota ES350. Another one that's highly recommended is this beautiful RX model. This is typically your mid-size SUV in the Lexus world. As you can see, it's very stylish, has all the great amenities. You've got these beautiful gunmetal gray type wheels, those really sleek headlights, and of course lots of great detailing on the front of these vehicles. Protective plastic works, and this is the F Sport. And you also have some great accents mirrors and even more glorious looking 15th century type handles. Look, you can get roof racks, and you also have this beautiful overhang here. Wonderful LED rear tail lights. And again, the RX 350 has a great naturally aspirated V6 3.5 liters bulletproof. I would suggest they'll stay with anything newer than 2010. Power steering leaks were a problem, and some of the infotainment systems were a little bit glitchy in some of these earlier models, but overall a very reliable vehicle with that same engine you find in the ES350. Another ultra reliable choice would be right here, the IS350 of many generations. This is the IS300 in the latest gen, and as well you can typically see that there are some subtle differences, so it's not just about the engine and reliability. If you look at these two cars, they're quite similar on both fronts. They both have the big mouth grille, they're great, as well as they both have these great little details on the front. The big difference is here, beautiful wheels on the IS350 right here versus a little simpler wheel arrangement on the IS300. Now they're both F Sports, as we can see, and you've both got the LC500 style mirrors tagging on there. Looks great. Sunroofs on both vehicles? Absolutely. But more importantly, they have some great details on a lot of these IS350 models. You'll notice this one here has this little lip on the wing right here, where this one has a wing, but it's a little flatter, more lower profile. These vehicles also have a much more detailed rear tailpipe assembly right there, as you can see, and over there it's a little bit smaller and less pronounced. So they're a very, very great vehicle, but the IS350 also shares that glorious naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V6 engine tucked under that hood, and that's why these things are ultra reliable. They're only slightly more costly to maintain than the ES350 and the RX. However, they're bulletproof. But a couple of other bulletproof models are the GS350, of course, with that, again, you see the theme, naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V6. We can also get the RC350 and the RC500. That V8 engine in the RC500 is also bulletproof. So definitely some great drivetrains and some vehicles that will definitely last well beyond the 5 to 10 year range if you take care of them. But there unfortunately are some real problematic ones. There's clearly some vehicles in the Lexus world that really aren't all that great. And the main one, for example, there's an LS460 from back in the day with a costly drivetrain that just gets a little bit cost prohibitive with age, just because of the added complexity. And then there's one key other one, the glorious and total swing and a miss, the sad and pathetic IS250, like we're looking at here, this older generation. Yeah, they have great wheels and Pretty standard looking mirrors, of course, one-touch access, and a sunroof to boot. It was this wonderful and glorious IS 250 like we see right there that had all kinds of other random issues that you just didn't want any part of. Transmission issues, there were electronic problems, but the big one being the carbon fouling from that direct injected engine was just a problem. Underpowered too. It was one that Lexus should have skipped. So yes, there's another factor you have to consider when you're buying or considering buying a used Lexus. Of course, we know that brand new Lexus vehicles are quite expensive, but unfortunately in the last couple of years, what we're starting to find is the good low mileage versions on the used car market are clearly demanding as much as they were new. So in other words, if you bought a car that was a year old, maybe even 2 years old, and only had say 20,000 or 15,000 miles on it, you could find yourself actually paying as much as new, or even in some cases more than new if it was a sought after model. If you're going to buy a used Lexus, don't buy a slightly used Lexus. You might as well step up to the new version, go into the showroom, sign on the dotted line, and wait your 6 or 8 months to get your brand new Lexus. No point in just getting down there and signing away the deed and paying top dollar for a used vehicle. And that's what Lexus vehicles do, because people know they can trust them. And a lot of those slightly used, I would say the first 1, 2, 3 years, I would say avoid altogether on the used car market. Now, where it does get interesting is the conversation about 5, 6, 7 years of age. And those are the Lexus vehicles that you probably want to start thinking about when you find the right models. That's where we start talking about depreciation. In the first 3 years, you're only going to lose about 20% on average of your typical SUVs or a lot of the Lexus models, particularly with the better versions and the V6s. But it's not until warranty is expired and you've hit that 5 to 6 year mark that you're likely going to be over that tipping point of 50%. So then you can likely get yourself a vehicle for about 40 to 50% of its original price if you just wait for 5 or 6 years. And you can get yourself a real winner on the used car market. So it's all about depreciation, and when you buy into that market defines when you should actually buy that used Lexus. I want to talk about the kind of people you should even consider buying a used Lexus, because remember, there's a couple of different trains of thoughts. There's the people that love Lexus for what they deliver, and there's the people that actually don't. For example, what does Lexus actually deliver for the goods, and what do the people who value Lexus and Toyota products actually value? Well, I mean, Lexus and Toyota vehicles never are the sportiest looking vehicles on the road. They're clearly not the most aggressive looking vehicles. When you got a vehicle like this that looks a little bit egg-shaped, it clearly doesn't have a real aggressive stance. You have wheels that are tucked in here clearly, and you have a really high profile here. So in other words, the tires are going to be wallowy. It doesn't have the biggest brakes either, means that you're likely not going to have a vehicle that brakes all that hard. It doesn't handle all that well, but what it does do well is deliver hundreds of thousands of reliable miles tucked under that hood. And the interior provides some really nice to touch quality features and elements, great leather, well-wearing parts, and buttons and things just never fail. But if you're the kind of buyer that values more performance driving, with the exception of the LC500 or the IS500, which are borderline, I mean, they make great sounds and they have decent power with 472 horsepower, the fact of the matter remains, most luxury vehicles by Lexus just don't deliver performance driving dynamics like you would expect from a vehicle like this right here. We have a BMW, and it's an M2. This is one of their most hardcore versions, ready for the street. As you can see, you get lots of carbon fiber on there. You have quad exhaust tips, and a lot of people love that look. You have really flared fenders, and of course wheels that almost come to match up with those fenders. So it has a really aggressive stance. As you can see, it sits quite low and it's hunkered right down. In other words, it's ready for action. You have other aero bits like this that keep it grounded at high speeds. Sure, you get some of the luxury amenities. This one doesn't even have a sunroof though. And beautiful LED lights. Definitely enthusiast based right there. Most enthusiasts who love these BMWs love them for a lot of these reasons. The big kidney grills, the angel eyes, as well as just that aggressive stance and spoiler. These cars will handle like they're on rails. They're blisteringly quick, and that's generally not the type of vehicle that you're going to find in a Lexus product. But with that said, when you take on performance, you usually give it up somewhere else. And a lot of these BMWs end up developing coolant leaks and oil leaks down the road. You may have a turbo failure or two. And anytime you have to do a servicing, it's going to cost you $300, $400 versus maybe 2/3 of that for a Lexus. We also can't forget the bigger tires and brakes are going to cost you twice as much money. So that's the trade-off. Are you looking for lower cost and maintenance and quality materials, or are you looking for the outright performance dragon like you find right here? If you're looking for that type of vehicle, long lasting, then yes, buy yourself a used Lexus. So if you're thinking about buying a used Lexus vehicle, then you have to think about some of the pros and cons. Clearly some of the pros right there. What are we looking up there? Lexus pre-owned service. Yeah, in other words, what we're talking about here is the fact that Lexus service centers are all over the place. You can find them, doesn't matter almost what city, what state, what country, what province. Lexus does do a great job of spreading out their service networks, so you have great access to repairs, parts, servicing, and all of that. Not to mention that a lot of parts are shared from these Lexus vehicles with Toyota products. Maybe you're looking for spark plug coils or brakes. There are a lot of parts that cross over and become functional between the two different brands, so you can both save money as well as potentially just find those parts. They're not a very difficult car brand to actually find parts for. That's a huge pro for sure. Another win with buying a used Lexus is most Lexus vehicles are generally quite basic and durable, and a lot of their durability just comes from the fact that they're basic. They're simple, they're effective. And yeah, while some of their later models are getting into some turbocharging, a lot of their older school vehicles still come with naturally aspirated engines under the hood. As I mentioned, that 3.5 liter V6 naturally aspirated. Some of their older outgoing 4-cylinder engines, some of the Toyota products being naturally aspirated, are clearly bulletproof and very reliable simply because they're a simpler vehicle to maintain. If it's simple, it usually means you're more likely to do your maintenance on it. If a vehicle is overly complex, it usually translates to a lot of dollars in the shop to pay for that $200 an hour service rate for a lot of these manufacturers. For example, BMW, Audi, you can pay over $200 just to have them quickly take a look at your vehicle. But with a Lexus, a lot of the vehicles are very simple. So there's just less labor involved in making a repair, doing a fix. And so because it's simpler, you're more likely to get ahead of the repairs, as opposed to being that young buyer who's a third owner of that used BMW that's going to start deferring on maintenance because they can't afford some of the complex repairs, and then you run into a real world of hurt. Lexus owners typically aren't that person that's deferring a lot of their maintenance. They just send it in, get it fixed, because it's not an overly complex vehicle and it won't break your bank. And another pro with buying a used Lexus is the fact that they make their vehicles out of well-constructed materials. They're well insulated, so you're very isolated from the road noise. They feel truly like a luxury car when you're driving them. What you have is a wonderful experience with a vehicle that's well isolated and insulated from the exterior noises. Yeah, there was a time when they were a lot more basic. When you look back at the older IS250, for example, simple mirrors and simple handles, simple everything. But things are really stepping up into the next century, and now some of the materials are outdoing those from the likes of BMW and even Audi. But you have this wonderful piano gloss finishing, all over texturing and different detail that makes the vehicle look much more interesting than just all one painted front nose. It actually breaks it up and looks very stylish. You have some great styling detail. You get these beautiful cupped hood lines right there. And look at those gorgeous wheels. That is absolutely stunning. And look, even down here, the rocker panel is great. You have that nice little piano gloss black along the bottom. Of course, look at these LC500 mirrors. That is a piece of art. I mean, look at that beautiful chrome detail there, and it's going to wear well for many, many years. A little rear splitter that just looks wonderful. The interior is great too. I would almost say that modern day Lexus interiors are much better quality than even most BMWs. So some of the cons can be quite significant with some of these Lexus vehicles, but there's some key things you need to look at. For example, what we're looking at here is a 2017 Lexus RX 350. This is the sweet spot where you want to start getting into these used Lexus vehicles, as long as they meet all the criteria and don't have some of these critical errors or critical problems. So there's some areas that you really need to focus on. For example, a lot of Lexus vehicles start to develop corrosion. If you look underneath the vehicle, start looking for rust. Look all the way under the frame and the chassis, and then you can tell if there's any big amount of rust forming, and that'll tell you that that's a vehicle you want to stay away from. But not just underneath can you find chassis rust. You can also get rust potentially in these areas. Flip up the hood, look underneath at the base there where the water runs down the window, and then it settles in there, and that can rust away. So take a look, flip the hood up, take a look in that area and the top of the fender liner here. Make sure you don't have any corrosion there. Make sure there's no corrosion anywhere along all of this lip or across the top. That could be an early indication of issues. You also want to take a look at rust along these areas here where they meet up. This is plastic, but this could be metal here. So you want to make sure that in some, depending on the generation, that those seams and those joints aren't the areas that you're going to potentially collect a lot of corrosion because of material and dirt and debris from these crusty roads that winds up settling in there and they don't get cleaned out properly. Those are areas for further rust assessment. So definitely, if a vehicle's rusty, toss it. Now, the most likely vehicles to see that big rust issue are the GX models as well as the LX models, but only typically of the older generations. These new vehicles are much better treated and less likely to see that issue when they become 5 years of age. Another issue you can experience mostly in the 2004 to 2012 model year Lexus vehicles are what's right there. You can see right here right in there into the glass. It's the sticky dash or cracked dash syndromes. And if a vehicle has that, you can expect to pay $2,000–$3,000 US funds to get that rectified. Maybe even more today with the way consumers are getting gouged. We're all taking it up the chute just to get our modern day vehicle service these days since this last couple of years. But that's another key issue that you definitely have to be sensitive to. Another issue that afflicts a lot of Lexus vehicles are the water pump. You may have coolant leaks. It may wind up in the V of the engine if you're talking about the V6. But more importantly, if you have a water pump that's failing or leaking, get it fixed ASAP. Because with aluminum heads, aluminum engines, they can melt down if you overheat it and the engine's throwaway. So definitely want to take care of the water pump and check that out. Make sure everything's running tickety-boo on that. Another critical part is if you're looking at a lot of these vehicles with the 3.5 liter V6, which is the 2GR-FE, great engines. Yes, they're relatively bulletproof, but there's one weakness. Yes, they have the all aluminum engines. Yes, the variable valve timing. Yes, they're ultra durable. However, variable valve timing, you get those pressure lines, the oil lines. If they haven't been replaced, that is a weakness. That's a point of contention. They can likely spuke and puke a bunch of oil on the ground. If you lose your oil lines, you lose the valve control. It could be an ugly situation. Definitely make sure that those lines have been upgraded if you have one of those late model 3.5 liter V6 engines. And another point is one I already talked on. It's the D4 system, the 2.5 liter 4GR-FSE. Yeah, that's that direct injected engine that carbons up, poor performer, just a spud and a dud of an engine. So clearly one that you want to avoid in the Lexus IS250 and pretty much any generational engine from that time frame. Reality is a lot of vehicles run direct injected engines now. But the difference is in modern day Lexuses, they've got their act together, and what they're doing now is a combination of port and direct injected. The direct injection gives them that performance and efficiency they want. The port portion allows the spray of fuel to the backside of the intake valves to ensure that those valves are continually washed away and you don't build up all that carbon. You don't lose performance, and it's just a better drivetrain altogether. So should you buy a used Lexus? Well, if one of my relatives were asking me, a daughter, kids, an uncle, an aunt, asked me if they should buy a used Lexus, I would be confident enough to say yes. But here's a few caveats. Many of these older Lexuses are like fine wine. They just get better with age. So at the end of the day, if you want to buy a used Lexus, do a little research and you should be good to go. And with all of that said, right there, check it out. You're going to love one of my most popular videos ever. Why are used BMWs so cheap? In case you're looking for one, check that out. You're going to love it. And I hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.